Hi, sir. My name is Rahul.
Hello.
I'm a software engineer based out of Hyderabad. So, my question is there are claims of police brutality all over India, and also it's a common phenomenon even in the other parts of the world, including democracies. So, my question to you is there any way we can systematically eradicate police brutality altogether?
Thank you, Rahul. What Rahul asked is something that should bother all of us. Even 75 years after independence, our police forces behave very much like they used to behave during the colonial era. And the purpose is to control the indigenous population and to force them to yield to the British dominance. Whereas in a democratic society, you must maintain order, you must ensure justice is rendered, and you must adhere to democratic norms. All these three pillars must be in place. Today, none of us feel that rule of law is in a good shape in the country. It's not because policemen are bad or good. Power is always prone to abuse, and there is no greater power than the physical power. The power to beat up or use force legally, or gather evidence and decide who is guilty or not. That's immense power. Therefore, unless we actually ensure that it is properly exercised, it's always prone to abuse. Not only in India, in fact, in many other countries, it's much worse. In India, too, there are many things we should set right. So you must treat it as an institutional thing rather than policemen being bad or good. What are the things to be done? The first thing is a lot of police functions have to be under the government control because no government can give up control over law and order. How to deal with an agitation is as much a political issue as a legal issue. Some agitations, you allow people to give free expression to their ideas. Some agitations, dividing society and promoting violence, would be much tougher. So this is a political judgment, both by the police officers and the executive magistrates and by the government of the day. So they cannot lose control of that. If the policemen draw a line and say, you cross it, I'll shoot you, no democratic society can survive. But crime investigation cannot be politicized. Just as administration of justice has to be independent of politics, crime investigation is what? It is gathering evidence to determine the guilt or otherwise of a person, to determine who is guilty and to produce that person before a court of law and ensuring that justice is done. How can crime investigation be controlled by the political parties or partisan impulses? It's wrong, fundamentally. Instead of understanding it, we are having very vague approach in our country. Either the politician controls the police officers, their transfers, postings, careers, etc., and therefore controls crime investigation, or we say, like the Supreme Court judgment in Prakash Singh case said, no, DGP should be appointed by some mechanism. After that, DGP is free and will get some tenure. It didn't work. We are pretending it's working. It's not working. We must have a nuanced approach of how to separate crime investigation from the rest of the policing and how to ensure it's actually done according to the norms dictated by law and modernity, and how to have a mechanism to monitor it. Independent judges, juries, professional police officials, but independently handling it beyond the pale of the government, at the same time ensuring effective coordination between other arms of policing, because you can't work entirely in isolation. World over, they are doing it. It's possible. In fact, the Administrative Reforms Commission report on public order is actually about police reforms. I myself have made a significant contribution to that report, not only the ideas, but also sequencing of the changes required, balancing all the interests of the stakeholders in the country. So there is a way of doing it if you really want to do it. There's no time to go into all those details now. Forensics. Even today, in most criminal cases, particularly when the accused is a poor person, third degree, beating up the fellow and extracting a confession by force has become the norm in the country. That simply is not right by any standard. It's morally not right, in terms of human rights it's not right, and it doesn't render justice. People will confess to anything under duress like that. I'm sure many of you recall, in Delhi city in a private school, when a young boy was brutally murdered, they caught hold of the driver. They beat him up very badly. He confessed to a murder. Luckily for him, CBI later investigated and found that a senior kid, a mentally troubled kid, was the culprit. Far too often this is happening. And because of this kind of a shoddy investigation, India has one of the lowest rates of conviction in criminal cases, one of the lowest in the world. If you actually take away confessions, probably it's as low as 10 or 15%, incredibly low. And society is poorly served. As a result, what's happening? There is pressure in case of very grievous crimes, very horrific crimes, for the police to take law into their hands and execute these fellows and lynch them. The Disha murder case in Hyderabad, or some years ago in Warangal, when a girl was, acid was poured on her face and ultimately she succumbed to injuries. The political pressure and the public pressure meant that the police had to shoot them down. That's not the way to ensure rule of law. They deserve no sympathy, these culprits in heinous crimes. But unless due process is there, tomorrow an innocent person will be a victim. That's a very dangerous thing. You must have very swift justice, very sure justice, in some cases even severe justice. But it must be by due process, not by extrajudicial executions. But because of a failure, there is this pressure. When you and I think that this is wrong, the general public are not thinking that lynching a person is wrong, or beating up a culprit, or who they believe is a culprit is wrong. That's a very dangerous situation in the country. And of course, procedures. Our courts and procedures in both criminal law and civil law are terrible, dilatory. We have to make them modern, effective, speedy, transparent. The courts themselves, our capacity of the courts, capacity of the police. We must increase the numbers, increase the professionalism, the technology, the mobility in case of police, and their ability to actually deliver justice or investigate the crime. We are deficient in all these respects. And we must also remember, you must empower the police adequately but hold them to account. In our country, we embrace extremely rigid norms. India is probably one of the few democracies, if at all there's any other democracy in the world, where a statement given to a police officer is not admissible as evidence in a court of law. It's absurd. Police officers given the power to use force legally, power to even shoot legally. But the same police officer, the evidence before him we say is not admissible. It's an absurd notion. Ultimately, police officers are forced to circumvent the law. There is also pressure on them to circumvent the law. That's not a wise system. Trust them, but verify. Have safeguards to ensure that the power is not abused. And in extreme situations like terrorism, etc., we have to have special laws to address those situations, but make sure that the police function within the boundaries of law. Whereas we have generally weak laws and police habitually transcend the boundaries of the law and then kill the potential terrorists, oftentimes extrajudicially. That's not the best way to build a society. Whether it's Punjab, decades ago when you had problem, or Jammu Kashmir or elsewhere, we have to strengthen the hands of the security forces when it is needed. Unless you have that kind of a nuanced and practical approach to protect rule of law, at the same time protect the unity of the country and the society and social harmony, we will continue to bungle, we will continue to move from crisis to crisis. It's time that we actually reform them. So there's no reason to give up on this. There are ways of doing it. World over they have done it. In India, where some attempts are made, we are seeing better results. And we must systematically pursue them. It will not happen on one day in fell swoop, but step by step, building consensus and doing things necessary to ensure rule of law and effectiveness of the police forces and justice system. That's the way forward.